The case of Sherri Papini's disappearance began on November 2, 2016. At the time, Sherri was 34 years old and a mother of two, living with her family in a small town in Shasta County, California. On that day, she had a typical morning, sent her children off to school, and went for a jog. She was known for running regularly, and it is believed she disappeared while jogging near her home around 2 p.m. When Sherri's husband, Keith, returned home in the afternoon, he noticed something was off as the house was unusually quiet, and Sherri was nowhere to be found. The children were at school, and Sherri was gone. At first, Keith thought she had just stepped out briefly. But as time passed, she did not return. Her phone, wallet, and car were still at home, and all of her personal belongings remained inside. This was an important clue, suggesting that the incident wasn't motivated by robbery or financial gain. Keith immediately reported her missing, and the Shasta County Police transitioned the case from a missing person investigation to a kidnapping case. Early in the investigation, police found blonde hair near the road where Sherri was last seen, raising the possibility that she had been forcibly taken. Additionally, CCTV footage from the area captured Sherri jogging before she vanished. As the investigation progressed, police became increasingly certain that Sherri's disappearance was not a simple accident or voluntary runaway, but rather a kidnapping, and the FBI joined the investigation. The authorities began tracking Sherri's movements and gathering witness statements from neighbors. One neighbor reported seeing Sherri jogging around 2 p.m. that afternoon. Moreover, Sherri's best friend, Jennifer, revealed that Sherri had recently confided in her about fearing her husband. Jennifer testified that about a month before the disappearance, Sherri said, "I'm going to break up with Keith soon, and that he's going to kill me." This led investigators to consider that Sherri's disappearance might be related to conflicts with her husband, Keith. Initially, Keith cooperated with the investigation, but over time, police began to suspect his involvement. They pointed out that he had tried to hide Sherri's whereabouts or distort the truth after her disappearance. As a result, Keith became a person of interest in the investigation. Meanwhile, Sherri's family and friends believed that she would not have left voluntarily, and if she had, she would have contacted her children. The case remained unsolved for 22 days. However, on November 24, 2016, Sherri was miraculously found on a highway in a small town called Redding, California. She had no memory of what had happened, and she was injured, with chains on her wrists and ankles, and her hair was disheveled. After being found by the police, Sherri was taken to a hospital, where she received treatment and was repeatedly questioned by authorities. Sherri told the police that she had been kidnapped by two Hispanic women who had kept her captive and abused her for 22 days. She explained that after the kidnapping, her condition had worsened, and she didn't remember everything that happened during that time. The disappearance of Sherri Papini raised many questions. Initially, Sherri's husband Keith wanted the investigation to proceed actively, but as time went on, police began to suspect him. After Sherri's return, suspicions arose surrounding her statements and her husband's reaction, causing controversy over the truth of the case. Sherri was a different person after the kidnapping. She had been deeply traumatized to the point where returning to everyday life was impossible. She suffered from severe mental anguish and would panic whenever she heard even the smallest sound. The noise of a knock or the sound of a phone ringing would send her into a state of terror. These sounds became symbols of the fear that had deeply infiltrated her daily life. Every day, the media contacted her, and people came to her house to hear her story. However, she found it difficult to cope with the attention. As a result, Sherri developed social anxiety and became unable to meet with people. Eventually, Keith rented a secluded cabin in the countryside for Sherri and their children to escape from the public's gaze. The family lived in isolation, blocking any visitors, including Sherri's closest friends like Jennifer. By Christmas, just a month after Sherri's return, her family visited the cabin, but she could barely make eye contact with them. She had locked the large gate, covered the windows with blankets, and installed surveillance cameras. At night, she couldn't sleep unless all the lights were on, and even the sound of a door closing would make her jump in fear. The trauma from the kidnapping made it impossible for her to feel safe. Her aversion to food also worsened. Foods she used to enjoy, like nachos and guacamole, which were associated with the Hispanic captors, now made her feel intense disgust. As time passed, Sherri gradually began to heal from her trauma. She found some stability by traveling with her family, working through her memories and recovering. However, Sherri never gave an interview with the media, and all the information about the case was revealed through her conversations with the police and her husband, Keith. Despite Sherri's return, the police continued investigating to track down her kidnappers. Initially, Sherri's clothing showed DNA from both a male and a female. Sherri's memory was hazy, but a composite sketch was made based on her description. Oddly, while Sherri had described the kidnappers as two women, the DNA evidence revealed both male and female DNA, leading authorities to consider that Sherri might have confused the voice of one of the female kidnappers for a male's. The FBI investigated and found information linking the case to two Hispanic women. But the case gradually became more convoluted. Many theories were proposed, including human trafficking or drug-related motives. And citizens grew increasingly anxious, believing the kidnappers were still at large. 4 years later, in August 2020, the investigation took a new turn. DNA analysis revealed that the male DNA found on Sherri's clothes matched that of a man named James, who was a high school friend and had been in a relationship with Sherri for over 10 years. When the FBI raided James's home, he initially denied involvement, but eventually confessed after being confronted with evidence. However, his confession was shocking. James claimed that the entire kidnapping was Sherri's plan, and it was a staged hoax. Through Sherri's statements and the investigation, it was revealed that the entire incident had been orchestrated by Sherri herself. Her family and the FBI had spent countless hours and resources searching for her, only to learn that it was all part of Sherri's scheme. In April 2022, Sherri's trial took place and she pleaded not guilty. She admitted to having an affair with James, but claimed it occurred well before the incident. She insisted that the kidnapping happened afterward. Sherri's family and her husband, Keith, continued to believe in her, but prosecutors already had ample evidence. James had driven Sherri in a rental car, and the rental agreement and driving records matched up. Moreover, phone records and prepaid phones found in James's home provided critical evidence. The most conclusive evidence, however, was DNA. As the evidence mounted, Sherri ultimately confessed in September 2022. Just before her trial, she admitted to lying and struck a deal with the prosecution, requesting a reduced sentence. As a result, she was sentenced to 8 to 14 months in prison instead of 25 years. The judge also ordered Sherri to pay $300,000 in restitution to compensate the FBI, the police, public servants, and the community for their efforts. Thus, the 6-year mystery of Sherri Papini's hoax came to an end. Sherri was incarcerated in a women's prison in California, and was transferred to a halfway house in August 2023. She is expected to remain there for about 3 more years. Immediately after Sherri confessed, her husband Keith filed for divorce. Having supported her throughout the ordeal, he was understandably betrayed. In an interview, Keith stated that he would continue to care for their children, Tyler and Violet, who were reportedly doing well in school. However, the public was outraged by Sherri's hoax. The case had wasted immense resources, and even though another woman, Stacy Smart, had disappeared from the same city on the day Sherri went missing, the case had been overshadowed. Stacy remains missing to this day, 8 years later. Additionally, Sherri's decision to falsely accuse Hispanic people sparked a racial controversy. In 2024, rapper A.M. referenced Sherri Papini in his song, Howdy, showing that the case still had a significant impact on public memory. That year, a movie about Sherri's story was also released, with Jamie King playing the role of Sherri.